statistic may actually surprise you, and that's the percentage of salespeople who fail to hit their targets in business-to-business selling worldwide. Now, this figure here is from the Corporate Executive Board, and they say that the figure is 40%. That was actually published by Corporate Executive Board in their 2012 book, The Challenger Sale. I'm going to talk in a moment about their follow-up book, The Challenger Customer, which is a really interesting read. But the TAS group, which really specialize in dealing with organizations that are in long sales cycle business-to-business selling, they believe that the figure is more than 2/3 of salespeople in teams are missing their numbers. Interestingly, I did a keynote in a boardroom for LinkedIn actually in Sydney just about 8 weeks ago, and we had only CEOs of the very senior sales leadership around this boardroom table for a forum that I ran. And when I showed this slide, some people shook their heads, and I actually said, "Oh, is your experience that it's not that bad?" And they said, "No, our experience is it's worse." And the consensus in the room was about 70%. Now, again, these were organizations in long sales cycles, where those figures really applied. So when you look at the fact that a lot of B2B sellers are missing their numbers and the cost of running a field sales force, which is astronomically expensive, when you look at this next statistic, which is what's the percentage of sales that actually fail to meet expectations of the buyer? And Forrester research says 85%, and there's also been additional research from Corporate Executive Board that says that 86%, so it's a very close number from two different research sources, 86% of sellers really fail to differentiate. And the interesting thing here is that if we lined up any of the salespeople in our organization and asked them, do you differentiate yourself, our products and services or solutions, and our company when you go and sell? All of them would absolutely say yes. They would say, well, that's at the heart of what you pay me to do as a salesperson. And yet the reality is people are overwhelmingly failing to get cut through and failing to differentiate. So why is business-to-business selling getting more difficult? If you have a look at that small statistic on the left there from Harvard Business Review that says that 90% of decision makers don't respond to cold outreach, we certainly know that cold calling is getting difficult. I've seen statistics that are about the level of 2.7% as a success rate for cold calling. We all know that social media is enabling us to research well, engage, get referrals, and do warm calls today. I'll talk about some of those trends as well in a few minutes, but this list is really a shopping list of why things are getting harder and harder for B2B sellers. I just want to focus on one thing in that list rather than read it to you, and that's about halfway down, and that's the fact that there's more decision makers involved. One of the interesting things in the Challenger Customer book that I'm reading at the moment by Matt Dixon and 3 other authors is that they believe that we don't so much today have a problem in the way that we sell that's causing a lack of success. The bigger issue is the level of dysfunction inside customer organizations with their own inability to gain consensus and make decisions. And increasingly today, we're losing business not to traditional competitors, but to do nothing or status quo inside an organization. They just end up staying in their current state because they can't rally support internally. So consensus-based decision-making is on the rise. There's an increasing distrust of the claims of sellers. And in previous days, the philosophy was not really that long ago, was that salespeople just needed to track down and sell to those individual buyer personas inside an organization. I'll find the economic buyer, I'll find the business buyer, I'll find the technical buyer, I'll get to the person with power of veto, and I'll tailor my message to those people to cover them all off. And people would think, well, that'll result in when they all sit around the table, there'll be no resistance to going ahead with us and we'll get the decision. But the reality is it's not about them buying in individually to your message, it's about them being able to work well as a team internally. So great sellers today are good at finding the change agent inside the customer's organization and helping them drive change is a really, really important thing. So I believe that the two biggest forces out there that are making business-to-business selling just increasingly tough is obviously disruption, and I could talk endlessly about all of those different business models that are out there from Uber to Airbnb, especially in the world of social. Even Citrix has had very high value solutions increasingly become commoditized as well. and they've certainly adapted really well in what they're taking to market. But either there's new technologies that come out, or the things that were high value just tend to become a commodity over time. And once they become a commodity, the focus increasingly actually comes on price. So added to all of this, Gartner have also done research, and they say that by 2020, 85% of business interactions will be executed without human intervention. Now, that's obviously in the context of transacting as opposed to winning and onboarding new clients, but you can certainly see the trend. This illustration that you're looking at is actually out of my book that was published 4 years ago, where I categorized the different types of sellers out there. And in the work I do for clients, I'll often help them recruit and hire good salespeople. And one of the questions I'll ask a salesperson is, where do you really categorize yourself? Are you more of a relationship seller? Are you more of a sort of hunter, business development person? You're very good tactically. Do you regard yourself as being strategic? And the reality is that every person I talk to will say, yes, I am strategic. And yet when I ask them, what does being strategic really mean, I very rarely ever get a very good answer to that question. So what I'd like to do for us just now, before I talk about modernizing the way that we sell, is I'd like to define what strategic selling looks like today. And we've all seen different versions of this illustration. I guess at one level, this is a representation of the buyer's journey. You can see at the top there that a buyer will go through a discovery process and then make a decision. But even before that, they may be ignorant of the opportunities that are afforded them, or the problems that they're really facing. They'll develop some level of awareness and be curious and do some research, and at some stage there, they'll actually build a business case and they'll go to market. And I think all of us have experienced in the world of selling being at the end right of that illustration, where our client is in the process of evaluating and selecting, and it's a very disempowering process for a buyer to be pushed through. There's not a lot of time, there's an extreme focus on price, they want you to comply with their process, they deny you access to power, and it's difficult to differentiate. And those organizations often are masterful at making supplies a commodity. And interestingly, in research done by Corporate Executive Board, I think we've all heard this statistic, that by the time a lead, let alone a tender coming out to market, but by the time a lead gets to a salesperson, often the customer is anywhere from 57%, and some research says up to 70% through their process. And often, if that's the case, there's some other agenda that's not good for us that's been set by a competitor or a consultant. So, this is really just reactive selling if we're at that end, and it's very hard to fund an expensive field sales force if you're being forced to compete on price. Obviously, what organizations do is they'll do things often driven by the marketing department to try and attract buyers a little bit earlier in the cycle. And you could argue that Citrix themselves running this webinar is an example of that kind of thing. So you provide some high value content that will attract people. And that's certainly better than waiting for tenders to turn up, but it still doesn't get us into the sales cycle early enough. So the thing that I really encourage people to do is, you can see I've added another layer to this diagram over to the right, and I encourage people to stop thinking about life in terms of when do we get a sale, but to instead think of life in terms of when is the customer live and realizing the benefits of the solution, product or service that we're actually selling them. And to make sure that we're accountable for delivering the right results for clients. And once they've gone live, to actually go back to them and say, hey, I really appreciate you awarding the business to us, and so glad that we implemented successfully for you. You know what, I'd really love to understand what was happening within the company or your market that caused you to go to market for anything at all. I'm not really wanting to know why did you buy from us over our competition. I'd love to understand what caused you to go to market and buy anything at all. And what that does is it gives you a sense of trigger events. And trigger events can take all kinds of different shapes and forms. Often trigger events are around people, so new people in key roles starting in an organization. It could be around scandal. It could be around poor results for a company in the marketplace with them themselves becoming disrupted. But once we start to understand what were the real benefits of implementing, what were the problems they were solving, what triggered their interest in the first place, the thing that does is it informs us to be able to go and have better conversations much earlier. Obviously, if we talk to them at the point in time where they're considering change, there's definitely an opportunity to influence, as there would be when they're building a business case, but not as strong. But the thing we need to ask ourselves when we think about a content strategy to really attract clients, because the first catchphrase I want to give you about modernizing selling is that we all need to move away from a paradigm or a model where we interrupt and push. We need to move away from that instead to a model where we attract and engage. And content is absolutely the key to attracting people. And the earlier you want to attract them, the less interested they'll be in your products, services, or your company. We need to be able to create really good content that is of interest to them before then. And the question you can see in that blue box is, what do my buyers look for before they would ever look for me, before they'd ever look for me as a supplier? It's a really difficult question to answer, but it'll help inform what it is that you need to create as far as content goes. And to me, the very definition of being strategic, remember I said when I ask salespeople, are you strategic and what does that really look like? And I struggle to get a good answer. This to me is really my definition. And don't worry about taking notes. There's a white paper that's going to be available for everybody after this webinar. These illustrations are in there, so you'll be able to get all of this through there. But that's really characterized by people understanding trigger events, doing their research, monitoring social and all of those other traditional markets, really preparing well, making sure that they engage early at senior levels and that they create an agenda around value and get themselves embedded in a really strong business case. Now, obviously that requires investment, and I really believe that success today is really down to pursuing less business, but targeting what you're pursuing far more intelligently and in essence out investing the competition to make sure that you win business. Really, really important. So another catchphrase here is that the way we sell is just as important as what we sell. Now, marketers don't like to hear this, but I'm going to provide some stats for you in a moment, which you'll find fairly interesting. But increasingly, the marketers inside organizations that would typically not like hearing that statement have themselves identified that customer experience, the customer experience they create for buyers, is actually the critical point of difference now. It's not the product being sold. And in many ways, as much as I'm painting a bit of a bleak picture for B2B salespeople, the ones that can adjust and adapt and modernize and get really good at what they're doing will continue to be the strongest point of differentiation for companies as they go to market, because that human-to-human interaction and the insights that they can provide is what will really make the difference. So I mentioned earlier that Andy Hoare had published this research just a few months ago, and he said 22% of sellers will be losing their jobs. What I've done here is I've overlaid his forecast, or Forrester's forecast, on top of that value quadrant that I've created previously. And you can see that there's three of them are in red. So if you look in the bottom left corner of that quadrant, those people that are really just transactional order takers, I facetiously call them socializers or visitors. I've often said to salespeople working for me, let's have a look at the title on your business card. It doesn't say professional visitor, right? So it says that you sell something. And don't be apologetic about that. Your role's got to be funded. But 1/3 of people that are in that just transactional quadrant are going to lose their jobs in the next 4 and a bit years. And the top left there, that's really your field business development manager. 1/4 of those people will disappear. And the reason is, if something becomes a commodity and is lower margin, it just doesn't fund that field sales model. Increasingly, bottom right corner for relationship sellers, they're the people, Andy uses the term navigators. They help their customers navigate the buyer's organization, the supplier's organization. 15% of those will be gone. Again, they've got to provide more value. Increasingly today, buyers just want to have all that stuff online. Give me a portal, give me self-service, help me do those things, do those things myself. But the only segment that's going to grow are these people that are truly strategic, the ones that are consultative in the top, in the way that they sell in that top right quadrant, that can function. I know it's a cliche, but can function as a trusted advisor, that do earn the trust of the customer, provide insight for them and a different perspective. They're the ones that will actually prosper. So let's look at this quadrant in a slightly different way. We've all heard of the term hunters and farmers. That's the top left side, the business development manager, and the farmer being the account manager. And we all know that transactional commodities are increasingly going to be transacted online or through other mechanisms. And hunters and farmers both know in their hearts and minds that they need to move to value into that top right-hand quadrant. But the quadrant is not evenly split 25%. This is actually what's happening. Everything drifts toward being a commodity over time. And if you remain a hunter and farmer, and as the transactional commodity grows out and you get stuck in that quadrant, that means you're at risk of being in that percentage of people that actually lose their roles. So there's just going to be fewer people in those other three roles. And the challenge is to work out, how do I move to value? And the challenge I have to CEOs and to the heads of marketing and sales in enterprises is, I think you've got to have the courage to have a really good hard look at the products and services that you're taking to market and have an honest in the mirror assessment of, is this really a strongly differentiated solution? Does it really create enough value for the customer? So is it either very expensive or massively complex? Because if it's either of those two things, you can fund and you need a field salesperson to work with the customer organization. But if it's not, then you can see that list on the left. It's either inside sales, it's on the phone. I believe LinkedIn is really becoming the new call center if you're in the B2B world. But do we help them transact through web and mobile apps? Can we use social media to listen to unhappy clients of our competitors or even of ourselves and create cases or opportunities to save clients and upsell? Or do we just go to market through channels? And increasingly, those business or those channels will grow at the expense of salespeople. So let me just go on to one other thing before I actually talk about what it is that I think we need to do. This again was Corporate Executive Board research. They interviewed over 5,000 professional buyers. So this is not what sales managers or sales people think. This is what professional buyers think. And they said to the buyers, what causes you to be loyal to or select one supplier over the other? What really are the critical elements? And it got categorized down to 4 things. So you can see on the left there, there's 2 that were both at 19%. So these are things that cause them when they look comparatively to select someone over the other. And the first thing was company and brand impact. So the brand, I guess, of the product and the company. And then the product features and functions and capability and the level of service that's being provided. So those 2 things combined are less than 40%. Now, the thing that's interesting to me is that if I, in the past have said to a salesperson, why do you think we won this deal or this piece of business? Overwhelmingly, I'll get the answer, because of me and my relationships. And yet, if we lose a piece of business and you say, well, why did we lose the business? They go, oh, we lost it on price. I believe that the reverse is actually true. And you'll see here, just as I reveal those names for the other 2 percentages, price or value for money is only 9% of the equation. It's the smallest piece. And yet, so often, we wrongly think that that's the reason that we lost. And sales experience was more than 50% of why people bought. Now, when Corporate Executive Board drilled deeper and said to people, what do you mean by the sales experience you received? It really came down to 3 main things. It came down to the seller offered me a unique and valuable market perspective, or they helped me navigate alternatives and especially manage risk. And that's important because often the seller has implemented these solutions for buyers over and over and over again, and yet the buyer may not have done one of these projects before. And then the third thing is that the seller educated them on things that helped them innovate and made them aware of trends within the marketplace. And I alluded to this just a few minutes ago, but Gartner research very recently has discovered that nearly 90% of chief marketing officers are going to focus on this piece. They're going to focus on their ability to create great customer experience as their sustainable competitive advantage. Because if you're basing it just on brand, corporate brands are diminishing by 6% per annum and personal brands are growing by 12%. So personal brand and corporate brand is incredibly important. Talk about that. But they're going to make sure that they deliver best customer experience. So I mentioned at the very top of the webinar that I'm going to reveal a way for you to build pipeline by 45% and increase quota by, it's actually 51%. And the way that you do that, it's a crazy term, I know, but is a concept of social selling. Now, the term social selling is a misnomer. I've got a picture of a lady here with a pigeon food ad and attracting a ton of people. That may be what Facebook feels like. You put out some content and people fly in and crap all over you. Certainly, LinkedIn is far more professional, but we all know that we don't sell in social. Social commerce is becoming a reality. It'll become bigger next year in 2016, but especially in a business-to-consumer context. But in B2B, we don't really sell in social. But all of the things that constitute selling, I believe, do actually happen in social. And I'll just talk through that. So again, we've got that buyer's journey there, but if we have a look at what we need to do, traditional sales is all about the things in that big arrow on the left-hand side, and we need to move away from interrupting and pushing to instead attract and engage. And that's where things like social listening and social research, collaborating with people online. Citrix have got some excellent tools for doing that really do two things. Their tools enable you to drive the cost out of selling, but they enable you to get meaningful engagement with people much faster. I'm going to talk about the importance of engaging with people quickly. So I'm just going to provide a bit of a framework for what social selling is in my definition. But the first thing is this: the reason that social is important for selling organizations is because buyers are already there. I was part of a conversation recently about has social selling crossed the chasm? And the view is, well, social buying already has, and social selling is about halfway over. But you see that IDC stat on the left, that 75% of buyers research online before they take a meeting with or engage with a seller. So, there's a big question here. What do people see online before they actually get to meet me? So if they do a search on us, what is it they're going to find? And buyers are incredibly, incredibly empowered today. And the other interesting thing in that corporate visions research over on the right is that 74% of buyers select the company or person that was first to provide them some high value or insight in helping them actually manage their risk and go and get the outcomes for them. So I've got a definition for social selling here. You can read that at the bottom, but to me, on top of building a really strong, credible, personal brand, and again, it can't be a facade. You've got to be the real deal online today. It's very easy for people to scratch past the surface, but we need to get good at listening. We need to get good at researching, publishing content to evidence that credibility and attract people, and then engage and collaborate with people increasingly online. Now, we all know that a face-to-face meeting with somebody is the best possible thing you can do when you're selling, but increasingly today, buyers are just so time poor. Buyers are not lonely and looking for new friends. They're really not. They're not looking for someone to buy them coffee or to go and take them out to lunch and entertain them. They want to know, can you help me achieve the outcomes that I'm on the hook to deliver in my job, and can you help me manage my risks? So all of these activities can be done in social media and with technology to great effect to accelerate the speed of business and still yield really good, strong results. So in the next 10 minutes before we wrap up and then go to Q&A, I'm just going to give you a little bit of a case study and a couple of examples of some of these elements. A couple of years ago, actually it was 5 years ago, believe it or not now, there was an Airbus A380 on its way out of Singapore flying to Sydney, and one of its Rolls-Royce engines exploded on climb out, and it was a horrendous explosion. The plane suffered an amazing level of damage, but the actions of the flight crew and the redundant systems that are built into the plane meant that they put the plane back on the ground safely. So you may have heard about QF32. And what I did is I used to be a pilot in my younger days. I've always been really interested in aviation. So I was very interested in what happened from a pilot point of view, but the thing that blew me away is Captain Richard de Crepney, who was in command of that flight, didn't just save the aircraft with his team. The moment the plane was back on the ground, he jumped into brand representative mode for Qantas, for Airbus, and for Rolls-Royce, and he did an incredible job. He actually briefed the business class and first class passengers. His co-pilot briefed the economy passengers live in the terminal, and he actually gave every passenger on the flight his own personal mobile phone number. And he said to them that right now Qantas are rallying 1,000 staff to find you hotels, to get you somewhere to sleep tonight, to get you money so you can buy clothes for tomorrow, and we'll get you back to Sydney as quick as we can and safely. When you fly Qantas, you pay for a premium experience, premium airline, and that's what we're going to deliver to you. And if we don't meet your expectations, here's my number. Now, I was blown away by all of that, and I wrote a white paper about how to create a customer-centric culture, because every time he takes command of a flight, he makes sure that his entire crew, both on the flight deck and in the cabin, deliver a great customer experience for Qantas passengers. So I wrote this white paper. I thought it was pretty good. I put it up on my website, and in about an 18-month period, I had less than 100 people download it. So, that was interesting. A lot of companies put content on their website and hope people will come and find it. A year ago, I decided to get serious about social media and social selling, and I decided to stop blogging on my website and move into LinkedIn, because that's where my market is. There's 380 million people in LinkedIn. Everyone that I care about and want to influence is there. So what I did is I took that white paper and I repurposed it into a blog post. And it's had about 220,000 reads. So you compare 220,000 reads with less than 100, because I put some good quality content out where my market is. And I had an incredible level of engagement from that. So in just under 12 months that I've been blogging inside LinkedIn, I've attracted over 10,000 followers. I've had 450,000 reads of my content, and I've got more business than I can cope with, and I'm not having to push and interrupt. I've got people coming to me. So that's really an example of using a content publishing strategy to attract and engage, rather than blasting, spamming, interrupting, and sort of pushing your content to people. So that's an example of content publishing, and the webinar today is also an example of content publishing. But I just want to focus on these next two of the 5 elements, which is this concept of engaging in social and then also collaborating. And I just want to give you some statistics that may really surprise you. So the first thing is this: response time matters. InsideSales.com did some research a couple of years ago now. But what they found is that anywhere, depending on the industry and what's being sold, but anywhere from 35% to 50% of business goes to the first responder, the first person that actually responds to a level of interest or inquiry. In complex business-to-business selling, we've all heard that phrase that time kills deals. If a deal gets stuck and it's not progressing, as more time goes by, the deal can just die. We can lose to non-decision. It just loses all of its momentum. But that concept of time kills deals is far more apt for the concept of leads. When a lead comes into the organization, if someone says they want some information or they're interested, it's incredibly important to actually respond rapidly. And now again, you saw that stat earlier that 74% of buyers buy from the first person that responded well. But this is really scary. The average response time in business selling is 42 hours. Now you think of how much money the marketing department and organizations invest in trying to attract leads into their organization. And almost 2 days is the average for people to hear back from the selling organization. And almost even worse than this, because leads are precious things, the average number of attempts to contact a prospect is only 1.3 times. Now, we've all seen statistics that says that salespeople need 5 to 7 no's before they're going to get their yes, but these people aren't even managing to get a conversation with the person. And to sort of contrast that, if you can respond in 1 hour, you are 60 times more likely to get engagement with that prospect than if you wait 24 hours. You're 100 times more likely to get engagement with a prospect if you can get back to them within 5 minutes. So as you think about modernizing the way that you sell, it really is about attracting and engaging through great content. And I believe that salespeople need to become content producers. Now, that doesn't mean that they need to write technical thought leadership content, but they can certainly curate other great content being generated by industry analysts or people in your organization. And it's not a case of them pushing out product information and company information that paints them as a salesperson. It's a case of them pushing out industry research and insights and things that are newsworthy so that they can go and be where the market is and be seen as the credible source. I talk about the concept of them being a forager for their tribe of great content. Because all of our buyers are busy, if you can become someone that finds great content and aggregates it for them, that's one of the ways that you'll actually create a really good, solid following. The other thing here that's a bit scary with all of these stats is that only 37% of companies respond within that first hour. So just responding quickly, that's really comes back to this customer experience concept. I want to give people a great experience. I'm going to provide great content on a website. They can navigate it easily. It's going to be of interest and value to them. I'm not going to annoy them with clickbait and putting lots of stuff behind forms, but I will make it easy for them to request additional information. When that happens, we want to respond quickly. Did you know that 23% of companies don't even respond at all to leads that are actually sent out there? So I'd really encourage you to go ahead and connect with me in LinkedIn. I write about these concepts, so just search for Tony J. Hughes in LinkedIn. I blog inside LinkedIn. I've got about 260 blogs there, a lot on customer experience and using technology to really drive the way that we sell. And I just really encourage you to think about modernizing the way you sell by embracing technology and get it working with your people well. We still want to humanize the experience that we give people, but think about how can I use technology to drive cost out of sale and still deliver a better customer experience? And then also, how can I use technology to go and extend my reach? Because our buyers are out there in social, and if we can attract them, it's a great way to do it. And using Citrix webinars as an example of getting engagement with people is a really powerful thing to do. Buyers today are often way too busy to take half a day out of their life to actually go to a physical seminar. So webinars are incredibly powerful. And then if you can follow that up with things like GoToMeeting, I just want to give you one last story before we go to Q&A. In my last role, I was the managing director for a global software company looking after the Australia-New Zealand region. And again, we recognize that getting good engagement with people quickly is really important. And what we found is historically, because we're selling enterprise software, is we'd want to go through a process. If you get a meeting, you go out and do discovery. Now, you obviously qualify the prospect as part of that discovery process. Customers often wanted to see a demo of the product and get a sense of how it worked and what it would do for them. We would keep pushing back because often when you demo software, it's all downside. But when we eventually got to the demo, we try and get the key people in the room. Again, with technology today, what we ended up doing was using Citrix's products to run GoToMeetings, to be able to show software to multiple people in disparate locations and deal with them individually and easily. So we used the technology to meet people's needs so they could see what they needed to see without having to force them into a bigger group process or to travel, which obviously delays everything and slows down the whole process of selling. And if margins are getting tighter, we've just got to figure out how do we speed up the sales cycle, how do we help people actually transact more business. So thanks for listening, and I'll actually just hand back to Neil.
Thanks, Tony. Now we've got time for some questions for Tony, but while you type in your questions, I just want to bring to your attention the exit survey, which will pop up on your screen as you leave us. We do really value your feedback, so do let us have some of your comments on today's webinar and suggestions for future topics. You will also be able to request any additional resources or follow-up information as part of this survey. So also request a free trial if you're interested in seeing more about GoToMeeting or GoToWebinar, which allows you to actually conduct a meeting with up to 100 people. Finally, you'll also automatically receive a link to the recording of today's session via email tomorrow. So I know a few of you were asking that throughout the session, so you will actually receive a recording tomorrow. Now back to some of your questions. I've just received one here from Sanjita. She asks, when you say content and blogs, is it reposting or rewriting content researched by others? Over to you, Tony.
Yes, so there are two types of content. There's writing original content, which is not particularly easy. I've done 250 odd posts in less than a year. It's nearly killed me. But there's nothing that beats original content. But what you can do is you can curate other people's content. So, there's people in my orbit that will take a post that I've written on a topic and they'll do some commentary about my post and then put that as an update, for example, within LinkedIn. So what that does is it creates a unique piece of content that's of interest to their audience, but they didn't have to come up with the original idea or write it. Now, obviously, we want to avoid plagiarism. From an SEO point of view with Google, we want to avoid having duplicate content all over the place as well. So what I recommend is that marketing teams work with salespeople to develop content. And there's a few things you can do if you're struggling for ideas to come up with content. The first thing I recommend for all salespeople is, even within your LinkedIn profile, write a couple of really good case studies about clients. Now, your clients often don't want you mentioning them or writing case studies about them. They'll say, we're not allowed to endorse a vendor. But you can do it in a blind way. In other words, you don't mention the name of the customer, you just talk about their segment and their situation. And you don't talk about how great your product is, you talk about the challenges they faced, why they implemented, what they achieved, and how they managed the risks and challenges in implementation and getting adoption, whatever those things are for the things that you sell. But that's the best sales training a salesperson can ever receive. So writing blind case studies is a great thing to do. You can newsjack topical events. So if you think of this concept of trigger events, I used to sell software to government for many years with a couple of companies that I ran. And whenever there was a big scandal in government, it was often an opportunity to remind people that they needed the solutions that we sold. Now, we didn't put out content that said buy our product, but the thing is you can actually create content that amplifies, in essence, the pain for people. And you can help it to actually prompt interest. So there's a number of things you can do to actually create content. I also encourage people to think about what are the common objections that you get, and write the opposite position of that objection as something really positive, as a reason why people should meet with you. So I work with people in the recruitment industry, for example, and a common objection they get is, I'm too busy. If you've got any CVs, just send them through, but I'm too busy to meet with you. So what I encourage them to do is actually write some blog posts about the importance of understanding and matching cultural fit when you put someone into a team beyond just skills and qualifications and experience, because that's the reason the person needs to meet with the recruitment consultant. And I get them to write about the fact that in investing 20 minutes with the recruitment consultant will save 12 hours and dramatically de-risk the process. So there's some ideas.
And we've just had another one come through from Matt. He asks, if we need to respond within 5 minutes, what have you found the most effective way to automating this response?
So I actually think that webinars are incredibly powerful because you're getting engagement with people really quickly. If you're putting up content in places like LinkedIn or blogs where people can comment and interact, it gives you the opportunity to respond quickly. So, the thing that's a mistake is to put some content up and then just go back and have a look a few days later, right? So you wanted to be monitoring that very aggressively. There's certainly lots of really good marketing automation tools, and I don't want to get into a listathon because I'll leave some people out, but there's certainly things like HubSpot and Marketo and all of these lead nurturing, drip marketing, automation products that importantly allow you to lead score, because what we don't want to do is jump on top of a prospect because they just downloaded one, white paper or something. That doesn't mean that they're really interested in what we do. So, but if they downloaded this particular white paper, then watched a couple of different types of videos, and then looked at something else on the website, maybe those things together add up to, gee, this person must be at this stage in their buyer's journey. This is what it typically means. This is time to contact them. So we don't reach out to people based on every touch point that they have with us. We want to be able to score and actually do this intelligently. And yes, we need to tune those tools so that they go to someone really quickly. And that's why, in my view, it's a mistake to feed leads through to field sales reps, because they tend to look at things the next day or a couple of days later. You want people that are office-based and outbound that can go and do that outreach very quickly from a call center.
We've just had a question here from Rumana. She asked, does social selling really work for B2B? The term took off in the B2B sphere, and it seems to have been loosely applied in the B2B area.
Yeah, so business to business is obviously different to business to consumer, but B2B, social selling absolutely works in a B2B context. I speak at seminars around the world on this. The white paper that you can download freely after this meeting, it'll be available for you, talks about the typical fears and resistance points of CEOs when it comes to using social within their organizations as a way to go and engage with clients. But it absolutely works. And I'll just give you two little examples. I was a speaker overseas for a large Australian radio network, so they own a bunch of FM radio stations in Australia, and this is a true story. One of their sales reps won the industry award, not the radio station networks award, but the whole radio industry award as the #1 salesperson in Australia. And she posted that up on her LinkedIn profile, and she did it very humbly. It wasn't done as a chest-beating exercise. So she said, she was really honored to receive the award. And I swear this is true. She got contacted the following day by someone who said, if you're the #1 person in the industry, I want to do business with you. And they gave her a $680,000 order. Another example is with a guy called John Dugan, who I know in Sydney really well. He works for an organization. He used social just to monitor people changing roles in LinkedIn, and he congratulated a client of his that had moved to another company and just said, congratulations on the move. This looks like a really, really good transition. Would love to catch up for coffee and just understand, what you're doing. And she came back to him saying, actually, thank you, and we are going to need to do the same things I did at the last role. Why don't you come in and have a conversation about it? And he won a piece of business worth about $500,000, and he avoided a whole tender process. So the term social selling is a silly term. Look, I know it is, but the concept of listening for trigger events and monitoring and engaging and publishing content and attracting people and doing our research. If we turn up to a buyer these days and we ask stupid questions like, so how many people are in the company, and where do you have offices, and what does your company do, and where were you before you came to this company? They just want to throw us out the door. They expect us to do our homework, and social is where all of that information is. So the term social selling is a catch-all for doing old school things in a really smart way, leveraging technology. Even the concept of running seminars and events, what we're doing today is doing that really efficiently and in a really savvy way that still provides engagement, but people don't have to take half a day out of their life, and these webinars can be run far more cost effectively than a physical event.
And we've just had Sanjita follow up with her with their question before. They've asked, does it matter if the content is beautifully written article with no grammatical errors, etc.? I ask because not everyone is a professional journalist or editor, but may have ideas that are interesting and want to share them, I guess.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So the first point is that blogging is different to publishing a book. So people don't expect a blog to be beautifully proofread and grammatically structured with magazine quality images, but we need to be professional, especially if it's B2B. So everything that we put online is building and representing our own personal brand. And if we publish content that's got spelling mistakes, grammatical errors, it steals other people's IP, it steals other people's photographs, for example. So I'm always very careful in 99% of my posts that I put up, I use common use images out of a website called Flickr. Now, there's lots of other websites out there, but I'm using an image that I have permission to use. So, obviously on the internet, everybody just uses everyone else's content. It just seems to be at plague proportions, and I'm also guilty of it. But first thing is you want to make sure you honor copyright and you attribute source and you do it professionally. The thing you can do internally is this is where sales and marketing can come together. Salespeople typically aren't great writers, but they're connected with their markets incredibly well, and they know the stories out there and the content that would interest potential buyers. So what I think can happen is that sellers can have an idea, salespeople can have an idea, and then work with the marketing team to help get the great images and structure the thing really well. I also suggest that salespeople buddy up with other people in their team to proofread each other's content and then put it through their sales manager to make sure it's okay before they go ahead and post it. And it's very important for every company that they have a social media policy. So an individual's LinkedIn profile is theirs. It's not the companies that they work for. It belongs to them personally. And I don't believe that an individual salesperson should push company product information and sales information out through their LinkedIn profile. They should show insight about their customers' industry and trends and all of those other things that really build their credibility. But you nevertheless can get your sales manager to in essence be an editor and a proofreader before you go ahead and put things out there. So you can do this as a team. It's one of the things I do with lots of organizations is I help them start to go on that content publishing journey. And the reason that publishing good content in a LinkedIn profile is important for a salesperson is not so much because it's going to attract leads to them, but because 75% of buyers research the seller before they go and have a meeting, before they go and talk with them or return that phone call, they have a look. You don't want to look like a quota-crushing, Porsche-driving Uber salesperson in your LinkedIn profile. You want to look like a consultative analyst person that understands their industry. So your LinkedIn profile needs to evidence the fact that you've got insight and credibility and take a consultative approach with clients. It'll support you trying to get meetings with people.
Okay, great. Thanks for your questions. We haven't had any others come through, so thank you very much for those of you that put some questions across. Now, just before we end today's webinar, I'd like to encourage you all to give GoToMeeting a try. It is a very helpful tool for social selling, as Tony mentioned, and it can be quite beneficial in your productivity in selling as well. I'd like to really thank Tony, It's been a very insightful and informative webinar, I feel, and it's obvious by the level of interaction that there was also some good knowledge transfer going on. You can reach out to Tony at the details on the screen, and we look forward to seeing you online again for some of our forthcoming webinars. We actually have another one next week called Why Working Out Loud is a Journey. Are you ready for it? With Helen Blunden. So we'll include a link to that in our follow-up emails to all of you guys. And of course, thanks to all of you as well and your involvement in today's event. We really, really appreciate it. Oh, we've just had another question come through from Luke. He said, you've mentioned in the webinar that there should be a link to a white paper. Where is this link? We will be including this, Luke, in the follow-up email that we send to you with the recording and everything attached. So you'll be able to access it there. Okay, thank you everyone again. If there's no more questions, I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you.